mutima we waduhinduye incike biduteze kuzabibagirwa niba mo ikibi cyadutuza tuza no biduteze kuzabibagirwa niba mo ikibi cyadutuza tuza
nubwo byakozwe mu maso iya oni n'ibi bihugu abicanye bakabyemera ubutabera bwaricecekeye nubwo byakozwe mu maso ya oni n'ibi bihugu abicanye bakabyemera ubutabera bwaricecekeye.
Thank you again.
kanyamugisha musafiri ndibuka kasiteri ndibuka kasiteri tekereza yakwibuka.
I would like us to start our program with an opening prayer. I'd like to invite Pastor Ribbon to come and make the opening prayer. You're welcome.
Dusenge bitabagoye nahaguruka tugafatikanya. Uwiteka Mana yacu, Mana nyirihumure ryose, Mana ivura ibisebe mu mitima, Mana ivuga ijambo rimwe imitima igakira. Turi imbere yawe muri iki gitondo. Impamvu yaduhuje urayizima. Dukeneye presence yawe. Dukeneye comfort iva mu kiganza cyawe. Niwe wenyine uzugera ubwina bw'imitima ukavura ibisebe. Mwuka wera bidukorere uyu munsi. Intimba ziri mu mitima y'abantu niwe wazivura. Biriya bikomere bibujije abantu amahoro wabivura bigakunda Mana, kuko ibidashobokera abana b'abantu urabishoboye Mana, kandi nibyo tugusaba mu bidukorere uyu munsi. Gahunda zose turaziguhaye, uziyobore abari mu nzira, ubarindisha amaboko yawe bageza amahoro Mana. Tugushima kubo wamaze kuhageza. Bana natwe muri byose kubwa Kristo Yesu niko tubisabye. Amen.
Dear Adele Kiwasumba, President of Mahoro Peace Association, and all representatives here present, especially Richard Munyenhwari, the host of this year's commemoration, dear Espe Nyasezerano, President of the Gatumba Refugee Survivors Foundation, Banyamulenge from near and far, representatives from state and local governments, friends from other communities, invited guests, neighbors, fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I hope all protocol has been observed. We gather today to remember the genocide perpetrated against Banyamulenge in Gatumba in Burundi in 2004 under this year's theme, Denied Justice is a Human Rights Denial. The nature of human rights is that they are inherent, equal, and inalienable to all members of the human family, their application universal. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights stipulates, everyone has the right to life. That right was denied on August 13th, 2004, when 166 innocent lives were killed and burned. Hundreds permanently handicapped, and a whole tribe forever changed. The sad reality is Gatumba has never stopped. It's ongoing. As we speak, someone might be dying. Denying justice for Gatumba is continuing to commit genocide against Banyamulenge. Remembrance is an act of honor. We honor the victims, their memories. We honor the courage of the survivors. Remembrance is also an act of prevention. When a genocide is dormant, it takes the form of denial and trivialization. Denial is the co-foundation of genocide. Countering denial is essential for breaking the cycle and preventing any recurrence. Given the irrefutable proof of what happened in Gatumba and what continues to happen now, in the DRC, the efforts to rewrite history are relentless and increasingly mainstream. The victims of genocide, Banyamulenge, are targeted because of who they are, a distinction fundamental to the definition of genocide. Right now, I would like to invite George Budagu to make an introductory remarks and introduce the program. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jean, for kicking off this event. Yesterday, we started off at 1 p.m. at the City Hall, and we did the walk to remember. And prior to that, I had spent almost a day in trying to craft what I was going to say today. And then last night, when I heard some of the survivors of Gatumba, it changed the whole dynamics of my thinking as to what I should say here today. And I thought we have to take a time and think as of why we are here today. We are here, and you all know it, commemorate for the 19th time the Gatumba massacre that took place in 2004. When you think about that, that's almost somebody's life. Somebody who was born in 2004, right now is almost a mature person. And you think, why should we do this every year, over and over and over again? There's a reason for that. Number one, we must not forget those who passed away on the night of August 13, 2004. Yesterday, we saw the lights or the candles and some of the pictures and names framed of each one of the victim of GATUMBA. When you think about that, for those who read the stories and news and reports after reports, you would think it's just the numbers. But those who were killed, they are not numbers. They are people. People with names, people with parents, people with relatives, people with stories, background, and aspirations. And that with also legacy. We should never fathom to forget those who passed away on the night of August 13, 2004. That's number one. Number two, the survivors of GATUMBAs. Those who are here today, those who are watching us online, those who are throughout the US, but also around the world. The wounds and trauma they've experienced is beyond nature, and it cannot be healed by itself. It's got to be healed with the people who are around them, who love them, who comfort them, and that's why we should do this as we remember those who passed away. We should never forget to take care of those who are among us, victims of the traumas of the GATUMBA massacre. That's another one. Number three, what happened in 2004 has not stopped. It's still happening even now as we speak. And it's a result of a long-term discrimination, persecution, and torture, and killings. When we talk about the survivors of GATUMBAs, we must not forget about other survivors of other massacres that took place against the Banyamulenge in Congo. I'm soon to be 50 years old, and I've seen quite a few of them. Let me tell you a little bit of my story. After finishing my elementary school, I moved from my village and went to one of the cities in the eastern part of the Congo, in Uvira. When I lived in my village, I thought we are like a human being like anybody else. It was my very first time when I reached Uvira that I experienced the discrimination that I've never thought of before. I remember vividly when we walked to the school, being named, being called names. Banyarwanda Kabila Muchafu, which means Rwandans are Doric clan. I remember when you're walking with the one who was older than you, like let's say your uncle or somebody who's older than you, being stoned just because who you are. I remember one of the events that I will never forget. 1993, when the president in Burundi was killed. Those who were in Burundi, you remember all the victims of Uhad. In fact, I lost my uncle from my mother's side in Burundi. But in Congo, where we were targeted. The houses were stormed over and over and over again. 1994, when the president of Rwanda, Habyarimana, and the Cyprien Taryamira of Burundi, they got killed. We were in Uvira, in Congo, distant from Rwanda and distant from Burundi, but yet we were targeted because of who we are. Fast forward, 1996, you all remember what happened. Thousands upon thousands of people from the Banyamulenge community were killed in Uvira, Bibogobogo, Kamanyola, Bukavu, and Kalemi, and other cities. That's 1996. In 1998, what is called the Second World in Congo, you all know it. This history repeated itself again. In Kalemi, Lubumbashi, Kinshasa, Bukavu, so many Banyamulengs were killed. And fast forward, now we had 2004 in GATUMBA. The same thing happened. Why am I saying this? If you read the narratives that are there, talking about the conflict in the Congo, tells different stories. But yet they forget one thing, is that the Banyamulenge are victim of the conflict in the Congo just because who they are. And we must remember that. And we should not confuse those narratives with our own narrative, which is the genocide is happening now against the Banyamulenge, and we cannot just sit aside and watch another genocide happening. So my point, and one point here today, as we remember today the victims of the GATUMBA massacres, let us not forget that there's another genocide is happening right now. And I hope as you live here, you can do something. And I'm going to tell you what you can do. As an individual, you have the capacity of advocating for justice to be served. Because what happened in 2004, the justice has not served yet. Agathon Rwasa, Pastor Habyarimana, they're still moving freely without fear of being persecuted. And so our goal is to make sure that those who committed the GATUMBA genocide are brought to justice. And we can do that. I want to take a time and thank all our elected officials who are here. I was sitting with Jose, who's representing Senator Collins' office. Yesterday we went to see him, and he's been a kind of friend. I've talked to him several times. We want justice. And our voice cannot go far, but we need also your help in terms of raising awareness of the genocide against the ABANYAMULENGE. And the other elected officials who are here, we need your support. And let us all join together and make sure that justice is served. Thank you very much.
At the moment, I would like to invite you to follow a commemoration movie that portrays what happened in GATUMBA in 2004.
Le bilan de l'attaque est de 166 personnes mortes, dont 55 corps complètement calcinés et 116 autres personnes sont grièvement blessées. L'attaque dure environ 1h30. 11 tentes sur les 15 qui abritaient les réfugiés congolais sont brûlées, mais ceux de rapatriés burundais ne sont pas touchés. Aucun secours ne leur est venu en aide durant l'attaque. Au lendemain de l'attaque, le mouvement FNL, à travers son porte-parole, s'est proclamé auteur de cette tragédie.
Nous avons fait une sortie, nous avons attaqué le cadre de santé de GATUMBA et la brigade. Une fois qu'ils se sont vus échouer, ils ont fui dans le cas de Banyamulenge. Lorsqu'ils sont arrivés là-bas, ils nous ont combattus à l'intérieur du camp. Que voulez-vous que l'on fasse? On s'est battu dans le camp.
Le 14 août 2004, le président du Burundi, le vice-président de la RDC et d'autres autorités se sont rendus à l'endroit de l'attaque pour constater les dégâts.
C'est un sentiment de forte désolation. De forte désolation, de peine, au vu des tueries d'abord qui ont eu lieu, mais au vu aussi des cibles qui ont été l'objet de ces criminels pour lesquels moi je ne peux pas trouver de nom. Parce que il est très difficile d'imaginer les raisons qui peuvent être à la base de ce carnage qu'on voit ici.
Consterné par ce qui est arrivé, je pense que c'est lâche de tuer des réfugiés, c'est lâche de commettre le génocide, même en terre étrangère. J'aurais essayé de comprendre que ce génocide soit commis en terre congolaise, mais que les réfugiés soient poursuivis même dans le dernier étanchement pour être génocidés.
Le 15 août 2004, plusieurs autres personnalités se sont jointes à la communauté de Banyamulenge pour les funérailles. Un jour après l'attaque de GATUMBA contre les réfugiés Banyamulenge, le mouvement FNL a revendiqué ce forfait à travers le porte-parole, Pasteur Habimana. Et aujourd'hui, celui qui avait revendiqué ce crime contre l'humanité déclare qu'il jouit de l'immunité.
Nous jouissons de l'immunité provisoire des actes et des crimes commis lors de la lutte dit par le peuple FNL jusqu'au jour où nous avons signé le cessez-le-feu. Je l'ai toujours dit, même aujourd'hui que je jouisse de l'immunité, je me suis présente.
Le président du parti FNL à cette époque qualifie cette question de la justice d'un calcul politicien.
C'est un calcul politicien qui est en train d'être fait, et rien que ça. Et c'est une persécution en pure forme. Je dis ça pourquoi? d'après les différents accords, les crimes de guerre, les crimes contre l'humanité, les crimes de génocide sont uniquement qualifiés par une commission d'enquête judiciaire internationale.
Le dossier RMPG 449/NTC mettant en cause Rwasa Agato, Habimana Pasteur et tout consort n'a pas encore été clôturé, il est toujours en instruction. C'est-à-dire que ce dossier est toujours dans la phase préjuridictionnelle, donc tous les éléments du dossier ne sont pas encore réunis pour s'exprimer là-dessus.
La communauté de Banyamulenge et les victimes de cette attaque n'applaudit pas la réaction de la justice burundaise et pense que cette dernière ne travaille pas trop sur leur dossier. Le 13 août de chaque année, une cérémonie de mémoire est organisée par la communauté de Banyamulenge pour rendre hommage à leurs proches disparus.
During the night of August 13, 2004, 166 Banyamulenge were mercilessly killed. 106 were wounded and 8 went missing in the GATUMBA refugee camp that is located in Burundi. Majority of the victims were young children and women. The Banyamulenge refugees, who are Congolese Tutsis, were targeted solely because of their ethnicity. They were massacred even though they were under the supposed protection of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. This massacre was perpetuated by Burundian and Rwandan Hutu militias allied with the Congolese Mai Mai rebel group as well as elements of the armed forces of the Republic of Congo. A joint report by the United Nations Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Nations Operation in Burundi, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, dated October 18, 2004, concluded that the attack was clearly directed against members of the Banyamulenge community and was by all appearances ethnically and politically charged. Various sources, including the United Nations report and the Human Rights Watch report, have compiled credible evidence that leaves little doubt as to who was responsible for the massacre. This evidence clearly indicated that the National Liberation Forces of Burundi, the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, elements of the Congolese army, and Mai Mai militias were directly involved in this massacre. The same United Nations report stated that these foreign armed groups operating in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, near the border of Burundi, harbor resentment against the Banyamulenge people. The Palipe Hutu FNL, a rebel movement led by Agathon Rwasa at the time of the events, openly admitted its responsibility for the massacre the very next day to the BBC through the voice of the movement's spokesperson, Mr. Pasteur Habimana. In an interview, he stated he did this for the simple reason that the victims are Tutsis to be killed, end quote. The other local actors, notably elements of the FARDC and the Mai Mai militias, were politically motivated to prevent the refugees from returning to their homes in the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to the UN report, 2 FARDC companies based in sectors 6 and 7 of Kiliba, which is in South Kivu, and commanded by Major Okofo, took part in the massacre committed against the Banyamulenge in the Gatumba refugee camp. The perpetrators were reported to have crossed the Rusizi River to the camp on the night of the carnage. Surprisingly, there has been no reaction from the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo for its population that survived this massacre, not even launching an investigation to identify the perpetrators. Despite the silence from the Congolese government, this massacre has been widely condemned by many countries around the globe, as well as by supranational organizations such as the African Union, the European Union, and the United Nations. While the perpetrators targeted Banyamulenge refugees in foreign countries and under the protection of the United Nations, something that has never happened in the history of mankind, the Gatumba massacre had all the hallmarks of genocide and was not a random event. This massacre was the product of a cumulative process that has been developing in several stages. As we commemorate 19 years since the GATUMBA massacre, no substantive action have been taken to bring the perpetrators to justice. Therefore, the GATUMBA Foundation and the ABANYAMULENGE communities worldwide call upon the United Nations and international communities to uphold the promise of justice made to the victims of the GATUMBA massacre immediately when the crime occurred. The United Nations to use all appropriate means at their disposal to bring Agathon Rwasa, Pastor Habimana, and their associates to justice.
tudafite uko twagira wa munsi mubi bya joro ry'umuruho Gatumba sinza kwibagirwa watumariya bacu
Joro cy'umuriro cyagitondo cy'umorogo ubw'abacurishwe uburoso basizwe baremwe ndibuka ya mibiri yabo yatwitwe igatsenga ndibuka isi yatubereye ntoya tudafite uko twagira cy'igitondo cy'umuborogo ubw'abacurishwe uburoso basize ukubari ndibuka ya imibiri yabo yatwitwe igatsenga ndibuka isi yatubereye ntoya
dukomeje kwibuka itsembabwoko ryakorewe abanyamurenge
uri umufasha utabura guseruka mu byago byose no mu makuba yabarokotse ni wowe humure Yesu tanga ihumure mu mitima yabarokotse
twihesha agaciro nk'abana b'Imurenge iyo utaye agaciro uratabwa iyo utimenye ntawe ukumenya kandi iyo utiyubashe ntawe ukubaha ntiwamenya iyo ugiye utaramenya aho uvuye ngo umenye aho uzaje utaramenya aho uturuka aho duturuka twese ni Imurenge banyamurenge agaciro tugaharanire imbere ya byose, katubere umurage, katubere ejo hazaza. Amahanga araducumbikiye ariko ntitukiyibagize ko turi abana b'imurenge. Agaciro kacu ni uko imurenge yakomeza kuba iwacu, tuhubake, tuharinde, tuhature, ni iwacu.
My name is Desiree Rusengo.
And my name is Eme Videri.
We're both survivors of the GATUMBA massacre. We will now read the names of those who were massacred during the night of the attack. And before we do that, let's request everyone to rise up. And there are candles, plastic candles. Please hold them up. And if the technical guys can dim the lights just a little bit. You could please dim the lights just a little bit back. All right, so we'll go families by families and we'll name each member of each families that perished. Famille Mignati, Foste Mignati, Kadafi Mignati, Mereweneza Mignati, Nyanome Mignati. Famille Rutekereza, Jacques, Mushambaro, Igiraneza, Nyamasomo, Ndatabaye, Nyazahabu, Nyamuryango Rutekereza. Famille Gasosi, Eraste Gasosi, Perusi Gasosi, Nyahumure, Bahoza, na Deborah Gasosi. Famille Nyamusore, Nyamusore Karaha, Deborah, Narutwa, Kayonga, Ngezayo, na Bebe Nyamusore. Famille Rukamirwa, Oze, Marisiana, na Bisetsa Rukamirwa. Famille Aizuru, Fia Aizuru, na Felix Aizuru. Famille Gatoni, Mugotwa Gatoni, Nyabyiza Gatoni, Deborah, na Eme Gatoni.
Famille Muhimuzi, Eliasi Muhimuzi, Munoni Muhimuzi, Mereweneza Muhimuzi. Famille Shemu, Marisiana Shemu, Esperance Shemu, na Jeremy. Famille Shon, Masigabo na Shon, Nyakiza Shon, Musa Shon, na Amani. Famille Kasa, Nyahoza Kasa, Ziraje Kasa, Jeannette, Yvonne Kasa, Bebe Kasa. Famille Vitati, Thomas Vitati, Eric Vitati, Dudu Vitati. Famille Zaroti, Nyahoza Zaroti, Bebe Zaroti. Famille Kanyabitabo, Odia Kanyabitabo na Neza Kanyabitabo. Famille Musafiri. Musafiri Hoga. Chantal Musafiri Hoga. Nyamugisha Hoga. Patience Musafiri.
Famille Gapingi, Nyabihogo Gapingi, Claude Gapingi, Giselle Gapingi. Famille Musafiri, Lydia Musafiri na Blaise Musafiri. Famille Mandevu, Lea Mandevu na Muhorana Mandevu. Famille Butoto, Cheche Butoto, Fiston Butoto na Mupenzi Butoto. Famille Mahinga, Munezero Muhire na Nyabyinshi Muhire. Famille Mukwiye, Uzia, Dando, Lucy na Daniel Mukwiye. Famille Gaturuturu, Zera Gaturuturu na Tantine Gaturuturu. Famille Mugabe Yohana, Nyabahinga Mugabe, Nyabirori Mugabe, Fille Mugabe na Bea Mugabe. Famille Rukungu, Claude, sorry, excuse me. No, I got it. Famille Rukungu, Claude, Nzabakiza, Nyagazura Rukungu na Muhuza Felix Rukungu.
Famille Sebahire. Murekatete Sebahire. Patrick Sebahire. Kadada Sebahire. Famille Muyengeza. Nyarukundo Muyengeza. Rusengo Muyengeza. Musore Muyengeza. Famille Maniragaba. Bukuru Maniragaba. Ndayisenga Maniragaba. Ange Maniragaba. Famille Ntwari. Pauline Ntwari na Jeanne Ntwari. Famille Gishoma. Askofu Gishoma. Kunda Gishoma. Famille Viguge Rumanzi Fabien. Bigege Fabien Inosa Viguge. Didier Viguge. Famille Runezerwa. Mukarugwiza Runezerwa. Bose Runezerwa na Biju Runezerwa. Famille Muvange Simon. Munezero Muvange, Edward Muvange na Mama Muvange. Famille Maronko Kagigi. Zera Maronko, Nyambo Manoro, Jeanne na Shatse Maronko.
Famille Serugarukira Antoine. Abitanga Serugarukira na Nyantebuka Serugarukira. Famille Runagana. Manase Runagana, Catherine Runagana na Mukobwa Runagana. Famille Gasungunu. Tonia Gasungunu na David Gasungunu. Famille Ngakazi. Inyas Ngakazi Bwana, Emmanuel na Daniel Ngakazi. Famille Kalala. Akiza Kalala Nezia na Ngwabi Kalala. Famille Ngirabakunzi Rukamirwa. Nyagakobwa Bebe Gasore na Mukunde Gasore. Nyine tujya kurikiza famille yatakaje umuntu umwe muri famille. Famille Munyakuri. Mukobwa Munyakuri. Famille Rugeza. Murora Rugeza. Famille Ndagiro. Odia Ndagiro. Famille Gahakanyi. Mado Gahakanyi. Famille Gafita. Nyamubyeyi Gafita. Famille Zuzi. Nyamunezero Zuzi. Famille Ruganza. Kajeyi Ruganza. Famille Muzuri. Ndayishimiye Muzuri. Famille Rushaga. Nyamajana Rushaga. Famille Rugabo, Nyangore Rugabo. Famille Kazingo, Mombo Kazingo. Famille Seruhungu, Nyamatungo Seruhungu. Famille Maria, Sifa Maria. Famille Ndakanirwa, Andre Ndakanirwa. Famille Rushemuka, Ngombe Rushemuka. Famille Bizimana, Kazingo Bizimana. Famille Nzungu, Michel Nzungu. Famille Rusekeza, Gikwerere Rusekeza. Famille Nyantonesha, Nyantonesha. Famille Ruhumuriza, Nyakirindo Ruhumuriza. Famille Binyonyo, Afande Binyonyo. Famille Semuhoza, Gisegeti Rwigema. Famille Ndasarara, Mugiraneza Ndasarara. Famille Rwibagiza, Espoir Rwibagiza. Famille Michel Zikama, Muroronkwere Zikama. Famille Semugazanya, Niyitanga Semugazanya. Famille Sekabumba, Niyonkuru Sekabumba.
hanyuma twari tubana na bagenzi bacu b'ababembe hariya mu Gatumba. Hariho bamwe bishwe kubera yuko bari babana n'abanyamurenge gusa. Niba tugiye gusoma. Famille Nyapamba, Sadi Nyapamba na Bahati Nyapamba. Famille Rulinda, Abwe Paul Lulinda, Byamonea Delphine. Hanyuma nabo hari abandi bagiye bicwa umuntu umwe muri famille. Famille Batubula, Regine Batubula. Famille Aochi, Leon Aochi. Famille Boke Oi. Famille Mbelechi, Echa Mbelechi. Famille Walukele, Walukele. Famille Mambo, Angalisho Mambo. Famille Sumali, Evariste Sumali. Famille Kiza, Jeannette Kiza. Famille Wisumbelo, Wisumbelo. Na famille Ndalo, Naramirenge Ndalo. Kaba n'abandi bantu babiri bapfuye batabashije kumenyekana. Umwe n'umwana wapfiriye mu nda, nyina yarapfuye nawe arapfa. Undi n'umuntu wapfuye agasha, ntibabasha kumu identifying ngo bamenye amazina yiwe. Murakoze.
Thank you very much. We will now bow down and take a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims. Very much. You may be seated now.
Thank you very much. Right now, I'd like to invite Adele Kiwasumba, President of Mahoro Peace Association, to make her remarks.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. My name is Adele Kibasumba. I'm the president of the Banyamulenge community organization called Mahoro Peace Association here in the United States. Thank you to the city of Portland, Maine, the Banyamulenge community in Maine for your warm welcome in this beautiful city. I'm so pleased to be here with many of you and happy to see so many different familiar faces that I haven't seen in a long time. My deepest condolences to the survivors and the entire Banyamulenge community here in the United States and abroad. Many of you know me as Mahoro's president, but I wanted to share my journey, my personal journey, and how I even ended up in this role. As most of you know, I was born in Uvira and raised there in the DRC, and some of my childhood years were also spent in the whole plateau in the ancestral land of Banyamulenge. Many of you know, we know each other as children playing and schooling together in Uvira. Majority of you are aware of the discrimination we faced as children growing up in Uvira, like weekly reminders of the shape of our nose, how we were told that Congo was not being developed because of our presence in Congo. They'll say something like, Funga kinywa, Congo endelee, being told to go back where we come from, Rwanda. Despite of the persistent hateful comments, I managed to have a memorable childhood in a place that always treated us as a second-class citizen. My family's fight was to belong. There were many periods of insecurities in my childhood, which I describe as the snow days when I describe it to American children. During this period, we would stay home or flee across the border to Burundi, and after the conflict calmed down, we would return back and continue school. Fast forward, in August 2004, during a normal school day, I saw my school principal come into my classroom and called me by my name and told me to leave the school as the hunt for Banyamulenge has begun in the city. He told me that my older brother, Heritage, was also sent home and that I should find a way not to be noticeable or seen as a Munyamulenge, or else I would get lynched in the streets. So the first thing that came to my mind, my racing mind, was to find a way not to be identifiable as a Munyamulenge. I avoided the main road. I made sure I was intentionally inflating my nose as I was walking anxiously. When I arrived home, I found my parents at the doorsteps, and they hugged me as they didn't think I would make it home safely. My brother had also made home safely. They told us that they are waiting for a bus and that me and my big brother Christian, who's here, should go to Kalingi in the whole plateau to join my grandparents because they didn't know, they need to split the family because they didn't know who was gonna survive. So this is where the journey for me to fend for myself without my parents began. I was 12 years old and a girl. Many displaced miners gathered at the river of Kalimabenge and embarked on a journey on foot that will last for 3 days to get to our final destination. First, the suitcase drowned in the river while I was trying to cross the river. So it got heavier and I still had to walk with it. I started crying for my mom, and I hope that she would hear me and come to my rescue. But I was truly crying in the wild. But most of my fear was actually fearing if I was gonna reach my grandparents. When I finally arrived in the whole plateau, I was scared. Would I be forced into forced marriage? Would I be raped? Would I be killed? Just generally, as a miner, feeling the fear of being taken, what can I say? Being taken disadvantage of. While I was wondering how I would reunite my family, I will never forget when I heard the news on a radio, BBC radio. I was young. I didn't fully understand why more than 166 people would be slaughtered under the protection of the UN peacekeeping. I knew well my siblings and my parents were there in the camp. We had to wait until the next day for the BBC to name the victims. That same night, there was an extended family member who was coming from Uvira, and he told me that my cousin and my younger sister, Deborah, was among the victims. The next day, the BBC only talked about the dead, but did not mention the wounded. I was left to wonder if my family were okay, or were they severely wounded and could end up succumbing to injuries. Few months after that, the KATUMBA massacre, my parents decided to move to Rwanda in search for safety. They sent for me and my brother Chris to join them. From Haut Plateau to Uvira, we were excited to join our siblings and parents. We arrived in Uvira, we started to look for travel documents. Because we were minor with our parents, we looked for school IDs, which we easily found. But when my brother went to book for a bus fare, he was arbitrarily arrested and sent to a local prison. Eyewitnesses informed me of his arrest, and I was shocked and fearful. Why would anyone arrest a 14-year-old? What did he do? I was staying at my aunt, who was married to a colonel within the regular army. So that gave me some comfort, because I thought he's in place of position. He's gonna get him released. And he's a minor, he did nothing wrong. So as I spoke to him, he seemed helpless and he was unable to intervene. I didn't know who to turn to. Keep in mind, I was 12 years old and I was a girl. I stayed in Uvira for more than 3 days, talking to my father's friends, begging them to take me to the police who arrested my brother, because at that point my brother had malaria in prison. And I didn't know if he was eating. So they took me to a police's house who arrested my brother, and I gave him $5 that I had from our bus fare as a token to release my brother. Shortly after that, I met my brother Chris at my auntie's house, and the only thing he told me as a reason for his arrest is because he looked like Kagame, the president of Rwanda. Before we left Uvira for the last time, we were both poisoned at the restaurant. By the time we got to Bujumbura, we were both hospitalized for 3 days. The time passed, we were able to join my parents in Rwanda, and then time passed again, the UN interviews began. We came to the United States in 2007. Our experiences never left us. It shaped my entire life. It led me into advocacy and humanitarianism. The time passed. In 2020, I was elected to lead the Banyamulenge community here in the States. I must confess that all my childhood experiences in Congo shaped everything I do in my leadership in Mahoro. And especially since my community continues to go through similar experiences. There is nothing happening in the DRC that we haven't experienced in the past. Most of you have similar experiences as me. It is my belief that the lack of justice for Banyamulenge who were killed in Gatumba has only amplified the ongoing extermination of Banyamulenge today. The lack of justice has emboldened the perpetrators. Lack of justice has allowed the hate speech that faster and reproduce what we are living in the Haut Plateau today. Personally, the best justice I have seen was in recent years, where in the context of recent plot against Banyamulenge from 2007 to present, The Banyamulenge across the globe refused to become bystanders while their families in the whole plateau are being massacred. This is the 19th year of commemoration of Banyamulenge killed in Gatumba, Burundi. Each year, every year, we say, never again. Thousands of Banyamulenge in this context meant it. Never again had a meaning. Though the regular justice has not been a reality, Banyamulenge rose up and stood with their brothers and sisters in the whole plateau through humanitarian assistance and relentless advocacy. Among those Banyamulenge are survivors of the Gatumba massacre who are here today. I want to thank you. I want to thank our community here in the States of their resilience. You are tasked to advocate and assist our community in distress. Remember, your community organization, MPA, was founded as a result of the Gatumba massacre. And I am proud you are rising up, and I hope you continue to do so no matter the cost. To the Banyamulenge friends, thank you for standing up with us, and let never again be never again. Thank you.
So let's take 30 seconds and just think about what had happened already here, right? You guys heard names of people who died that day, some slow, some fast. In that camp, as some were burning, some were going to the bushes, fleeing for their lives. So we will hear a testimony, just like you heard from Adele, a survivor. You will hear another testimony from Gena, who was in Gatumba that night. So I'd like her to come forward and give her testimony.
Before I speak, I'm going to ask the young lady I was sitting with to come forward, and my husband. I'm going to give you a couple scripture that keep me going when I have some of the bad days, or all the survivors who can come forward, please, you can come. One of the scriptures, Psalm 23, verse 4, havuga mu rurimi rwacu ngo naho nanyura mu gikombe cy'igicucu cy'urupfu sinzatinya ikibi cyose kuko ndi kumwe nawe. Irindi ni mu Bafilipi, Philippians 4:13. It says that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. My name is Ngena Judith. Sorry, my voice is a little bit loud. In Gatumba, I was 14 years old, but I'm standing here right now. I'm 35 years old, close to 35. This December, I'm a mother of 5 beautiful children. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. And it's a shame I'm still standing here after 19 years speaking, and there is no justice for those that we have been lost. If I remember correctly, it was around 9:45 p.m. We were sitting outside. I was one of the girls who's here. Mukeshimana. We were just being young kids talking. We heard some gunshots. My mother came outside and she asked us to come inside. But she was really shaken and we were laughing at her. Because in Burundi, for those who live in Burundi, it was kind of normal to hear gunshots every day. And she really asked us to come inside because she doesn't feel okay. After we got into the camp, the gunshot became more. And I remember, sorry. Ratubabarira, it's not easy. I remember my mom telling me that she'd been shot in the head. And she let me know that she was not going to survive. She knows she was going to die. But she had my nephew who was only 1 year old. And she asked me, if I don't make it, no matter what happened, you have to take him. At 14 years old, I was responsible to save my life and to save the life of my brother. And that turned on my right. My brother, who was the most handsome young man, he never had chance to experience life. He was only 17. He was calling my father, and he was shot. They threw a grenade in his neck, so he couldn't move. But through all that, they were shooting, throwing grenades, killing people with any object they had. My father was shot, so we had to go and give his set so we can leave the camp because the camp was burning. I didn't want to leave my mom behind. Even though she was gone, I just want to stay closer to her. As we were getting ready to leave the camp just to go sit outside, we heard people calling. And they were calling in Kirundi, which is the language that we understand. They say, you guys should come outside. We're going to help you. And for once, we had little hope. My father said, finally, people are here to help us, but it was the rebel. As we get to the door, I saw the most horrific things in my life. They asked my dad to kneel down and to lay my brother on the floor in the grass. And they poured gasoline on him while he was alive. Even animals, they don't get killed like that. N'inyamaswa ntabwo zicwa gutyo. Uko bishe abantu hariya. Through the whole time he was burning, he was telling me that you are going to be okay. And one of them, as I tried to turn around, he told me, you have to watch. You have to sit here and watch. And I had to sit there and watch my hero burn alive. After he passed, I tried to wake my brother up, and I found out he passed also. I had my nephew, Gloria. Then I realized he was also shot in the neck. I was just sitting over there. I asked one of them if he wanted to kill me because I didn't want to leave. I still hear his voice. He told me that I'm not gonna kill you because killing you is doing you a favor. You are going to suffer and die. But I'm standing here today and I hope he saw this video. I'm strong and I'm living. And I will not let my past define who I am. So we had to walk just to find a place to hide. I remember Tate Mama Muvange came and she asked me if we can just keep going through the bush, but I didn't want to leave my parents and my brother. And we walked through the whole night. Finally, we got to a place where they get us to the hospital. That's when I even found out that I was also shot. So it took me a whole night to realize that I was shot and I was bleeding. The night of the Gatumba, I lost 9 family members, and I'm not talking about the neighbors or close friends. I lost my father, his name was Rukamigwaoze. I lost my mother, her name was Nyabintu Marisiana. I lost my brother, his name was Visita Rukamigwa Mahinga. I lost my older sister, Munezero Muhire Mahinga. I lost my other sister, Nyabzinshi Muhire Mahinga. I lost also my nephew, Fi Aizuru. And I lost my, Fi was my niece, I'm sorry. And I also lost my nephew, Felix, who was only 9 months old. I also lost my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law who left 5 children behind, Mohoran. I wrote a whole thing in my phone to speak, but I can't even read. Every person who's standing over here had lost family members. Some of us got married, and you see other people get married and their father walked them, handed them to their husband. We never experienced that. A couple years ago, one of my child came home and asked me, other people bring their grandparents and their grandmother's pictures playing or videos, and I didn't know how to respond to her because I've been robbed. We don't choose our family. We don't choose where we've been born. And I'm standing here pleading to every person who's able. Please, we need a justice. It's still happening. Even a couple days ago, one of our family members was killed just for the way you look. We need justice. 19 years, I'm here with my sons who are 14, exactly same age I was. It's inhuman. Yesterday, Princeton said that the invisible scars are the most painful ones. We walk and people think that it's normal, but really our heart has been broken. Thank you, and we need justice, please. Murakoze.
So this horror happened in Gatumba. That's in Burundi, right? The victims are Congolese. They used to live in Congo. They were persecuted in Congo. They crossed the borders, went to the neighboring country to seek refuge. and then they were killed when they were in Burundi. So this wasn't an isolated act. It wasn't a massacre. It was a genocide. If any Munyamulenge would have been in Gatumba on August 13th, would have died. So it wasn't some crazy people running around, you know, it wasn't a mass shooting, it was a genocide. Our next speaker is Gregory. Gregory is a former research professor in genocide studies and prevention at the George Mason University. He's best known for his work in the area of genocide studies. He is the founder and president of Genocide Watch, the founder and director of the Cambodian Genocide Project, and the chair of the Alliance Against Genocide from 2007 to 2009. He was also the president of the International Association of Genocide Studies. Genocide scholars, sorry. He couldn't join us physically today, but he will give his remarks over Zoom to shed a light on why Gatumba should be classified as a genocide. Gregory, if you can hear me, you can go ahead. One second, Gregory, we can't hear you.
Should be called a genocidal massacre. The best report about the massacre that was written right after it was made by Human Rights Watch, in which they discuss who was responsible for this massacre, and they concluded that it was the FNL, the essentially Hutu-based rebel movement in Burundi at that time, and that it was not, in fact, one that included a lot of Interahamwe from Rwanda or a lot of Mai from the Congo. In other words, this was essentially a massacre carried out by one rebel force. And the Human Rights Watch report, I'm sure, can be challenged. And maybe there were a few Interahamwe and a few Mai involved in this massacre. But the main point is that, in fact, the FNL claimed responsibility for this massacre. They admitted they did it. And in fact, an arrest warrant was issued for the spokesperson for the FNL and for the head of the FNL, Rwasa, at the time by the Burundian government. So we know who did this massacre, which killed at least 152 people out of 800 in that refugee camp. And it was a massacre that was planned. It was not, something that just accidentally happened. In fact, there were warnings that it would happen from a number of informed sources before it happened. It was also systematically carried out. We don't know exactly how many people, were participants in the massacre, probably around 100, maybe less. But the point was, it was systematic. The attackers went from tent to tent, shot up the tents, and then burned the tents and burned up most of the, property in that particular camp. Now, the reason why this is a genocidal massacre is because it was ethnically targeted. It was specifically targeted against Banyamulenge. And in fact, people from other ethnic groups were exempted from being killed. When they found out someone was Bembe, for instance, they'd let them go. And there were other examples of that, documented. So what we really should be concerned about here is the fact that it was an ethnically targeted massacre, and that, folks, is an act of genocide. The reason why people have trouble with using the word genocide is they think a genocide has to be of everybody, and it has to be thousands of people. Well, that's not true. Genocide can be against only a few people who are targeted because of their ethnic identity or their national or their religious or their racial identity. And that's what happened here. So this was a genocidal massacre. Now, I've long had a dispute with Human Rights Watch about this because they are very reluctant to ever use the word genocide. I think they have an erroneous interpretation of the Genocide Convention and the intent necessary and also the numbers necessary to justify use of the word genocide. Well, I'm a genocide scholar. I've been studying this for 40 years. And frankly, I think I know more about the Genocide Convention than the people at Human Rights Watch. I think they're wrong not to call this genocide. But what the Human Rights Watch people did, however, was document all the facts necessary to prove that it was a genocide. Now, genocide requires that you have essentially three elements. First of all, the intention to carry it out. In other words, it isn't some accidental or, unplanned act that is done. Secondly, it has to be against a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. And this qualifies because it was aimed at the Banyamulenge. And fourth, and thirdly, it has to consist of certain acts, which are acts of genocide. And the first, as you know, in 2A of the Genocide Convention, is killing members of the group. Well, that's what happened here. By the way, and this is important to remember, genocide isn't just killing members of the group. It can also be causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Rape, for instance, is an act of genocide. It can also be creating conditions of life that are deliberately intended to cause the destruction of the group. It can be the limitation of births within the group, and it can be taking away the children of the group. So remember, in fact, Putin is currently being indicted for taking away the children of Ukrainians. So it's a good example of why the Genocide Convention should not be forgotten to also have these other elements. So let me just talk about why this is important to understand. This isn't the last attack on the Banyamulenge. The Banyamulenge are still being attacked, and especially in the Congo at Minembwe and many other places. The war against the Banyamulenge by essentially Hutu forces and other forces, the Mai Mai and other groups within the Congo, continues today. And it's being largely ignored. A lot of people are not paying attention to it. One reason is that the world has too many genocides, I suppose, and they say, "Oh, this one's really hard to, get to. How are we going to stop this?" But the other is the ineffectiveness of the UN peacekeeping force in the Congo. It has been unable to stop the attacks by the Mai Mai on the Banyamulenge, including at Minembwe and a number of places around the Congo. In other words, the basic narrative of anti-Tutsi massacres in the whole Rift Valley area, in the Congo, in Rwanda, in Burundi, continues today. And the world better sit up and watch it and do something about it to stop it, to prevent it, because otherwise we're going to have yet another or more genocides in these three countries. And it will extend up to Uganda too, because you have also essentially the same kind of ethnic divisions in Uganda. So what we're looking at here, in other words, is not just a commemoration. We are commemorating a massacre that occurred in 2004 but was already well known to possibly happen earlier than that. That's why these people were in a refugee camp in the first place. What we need to remember is that the possibility of more genocide against Banyamulenga people, who are basically Tutsi people, will occur unless we try to stop it. And I don't see right now an effective UN force that is stopping it. So this is why I am calling an alarm, if you will, a warning, that this commemoration should not only be a commemoration, it should also be a warning to the world and to the UN especially, that these massacres will continue if the UN does not make its peacekeeping forces in that region effective to actually protect the Banyamulenga who need the protection. So that's my message to you today. I thank you for having this commemoration. I've been participating in these commemorations since, well, the early 2000s, and we will continue to at Genocide Watch. Our job is to warn the world about upcoming genocides, about possible genocides, and then to try to help policymakers think through how those genocides can be prevented. And what you are doing here today is, in fact, a very important way of prevention. It is taking it is telling people these were the responsible people for this genocide, because it was a genocide, and they should be prosecuted. And there are laws in Burundi under which they could be prosecuted. There was one passed in 2003, for instance, that makes it a crime to commit acts of genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes in Burundi. But nobody's ever been prosecuted for it. And the other thing that could be done, of course, this massacre occurred after the International Criminal Court was created. And in fact, an ICC investigation could be undertaken into this massacre still today, because the ICC was already in, and Burundi had accepted its as a state party to the ICC in 2003, which, in other words, occurred before this massacre happened. Now Burundi has tried to withdraw from the ICC, but that does not make it immune from prosecutions for acts that occurred while it was a party to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court. So it's too late for Burundi to withdraw from the ICC to avoid prosecutions for this massacre, for the GATUMBA massacre. So these possibilities are still there. When I was in the State Department, I also wrote a resolution to essentially, it was a commission of inquiry to look into the possibilities of genocide in Burundi. And as you may know, the commission that we sent in, some of whom were personal friends of mine, Patrick Gaffney was one of those people who I went to my PhD program at the University of Chicago with. Remarkable person. Anyway, the point is that commission concluded that, in fact, genocide had been committed in Burundi on both sides. It had been committed by Tutsis against Hutus in 1972, and it had since then had been committed, especially in the 1990s, Hutus against Tutsis. So in other words, this is it's a country in which they've had double genocides. And so we need to always be aware that this could happen again in Burundi, because the forces of division are still there. And as you well know, the country will not survive if these forces of division are not overcome. So I'm very grateful to be able to speak to you today and to point out how important your commemoration is. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. So it's an established fact that what happened in Gatumba was a genocide. And it's not a probability or a possibility that another genocide will happen. It's happening as we speak. That will be demonstrated by, it's being demonstrated by continued hate speech in the Congo. Today with us is Dr. Bojan Coulibaly. She is the African Language Program Manager at Harvard. She was a college fellow in African Studies at the Department of African and African American Studies at Harvard from 2019 to 2021. Prior to joining Harvard, she was a Fulbright recipient and a teaching and research scholar in African Studies at Gaston Berger University in Senegal. She holds a PhD in African Studies from the University of Orleans Tours and specializes in African history and political thought, post-colonial and trauma studies, conflict discourse analysis, atrocity prevention, peace and security, African literature and languages. Welcome, Dr. Bojan.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I would like to pay tribute to the families of the victims and communicate my sincerest condolences to the families and pay tribute to the victims and survivors of the GATUMBA massacre. Today I would like to reiterate what has been said, and in addition to Dr. Stanton, in addition to the argument for naming it genocide, I think it's very important to discuss the omnipresence of hate ideology, which is at the basis of what is going on in this region. So I try to contextualize it to what is happening today and focus more on the notion of prevention. So how do we prevent this from happening again? Is there a way of me changing the slides or? Okay, thank you. So as you can see, I will first focus on the notion of hate speech being omnipresent and hate violence in DRC, which today is a situation, an alarming situation, as Dr. Stanton said it earlier and was reiterated by friends and colleagues here. I will try to focus a little bit on the causes of it as well, because this has been ongoing for the past century. And I would like to then explain a little bit, or at least emphasize what is happening again in terms of how do we interpret, how do we read the situation? Because one main problem here in what is going on today in Eastern Congo, but also I would say more broadly in the Great Lakes with regards to the hate ideology, is that we tend to have a wrong reading of the situation. And Dr. Stanton mentioned Human Rights Watch. I think we tend to not contextualize enough within a historical, I would say, development of how things developed originally in the context of colonialism, more specifically, or prior to the arrival of the Belgians and the Germans, or around the same time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just quickly today, are dealing with unprecedented levels of hate speech and hate violence across all layers of society. Again, borders, because this is a trans-border situation, Burundi, and this is GATUMBA massacre, is almost a perfect illustration of how this is a trans-border hate ideology situation. We are dealing with impunity, which means that none of these massacres are really addressed appropriately, and particularly the GATUMBA massacre, which, as we said earlier, we know who committed it and why. This is delaying crisis resolution today in the Congo, and as we know, the UN has been there for 20 years, the UN peacekeeping mission, or almost 25 years, and this impunity leads to this exacerbation of insecurity, hate, violence, etc. And we are at a heightened level of atrocity crimes. So at this point, calling it genocide is obvious, but at the same time, almost expecting the international community to name genocide every single massacre is going to become a challenge. I think it's important to call the entire situation a genocide. Some people talked about slow genocide. A lot of international law experts don't want to call it genocide. I think that the gist of the matter, or the most important aspect of this, is that there is hate ideology, and it's eradicating hate that we need to do. Next slide, please. So again, on the current situation, I just took the example of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and the GATUMBA massacre as case studies, but there is a need for a comprehensive politics of memory on each one of these events that have been happening since broadly the independences, so the end of 1950s and beginning of 1960s. It's important that these international institutions like the UN recognize hate violence that is targeting Banyamulenge and Congolese Tutsi, broadly speaking, that includes anybody assimilated to the Tutsi community, Rwandophone communities as well. The Congolese authorities have not taken any measures to address the issue, which again leads to the situation of impunity in which we are finding ourselves today, to the point where social media is spreading these images again today of people getting lynched and burned alive, and even their flesh being consumed. So the international community is responsible and complicit in the way that it is justifying this violence, calling it tribalism, calling it, since time immemorial, Africans, killing other Africans. And that is where the problem needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. So today, just to remind that we did have several statements, including by the UN Office on Genocide Prevention, that has rang the alarm about the Banyamulenge community being targeted. Recently, a month ago, the member states at the UN Security Council themselves explicitly stated out that there was hate speech leading to hate violence, xenophobia against Congolese Tutsi communities, and several member states, permanent and non-permanent members or elected members, were voicing that out. The fact that the entire civil society, but also public officials, and also international institutions, officials, are spreading hate speech and xenophobia. Here are just a few examples, but we have on the left, we have Valériane Dena, who works for the UN today. She's in Senegal, but she was in Centrafrique, in CAR before. So Charles Nana, I don't think I need to introduce the type of books and theories, conspiracy theories against the Tutsi that he has been spreading, but this is open and explicit xenophobia or call for violence. and incitement to war that they are spreading. We have Bienvenue Matumo, who is today probably the most well-known spokesperson of Lucha, a civil society movement, and then Tina Salama, who is the spokesperson of the President Tshisekedi. So it is just a sample of the type of messages that we see very much spread. Next slide, please. So this is quickly, I just wanted to focus on some of the aspects of the statement. I think this is a very important statement by Alice Nderitu, who visited Kinshasa and has stated this clearly, that we are in a situation that is similar to what has happened in Rwanda in 1994 against the Tutsi. She has based her analysis on the UN Framework of Analysis for Atrocity Crimes, which is very well done in a way that it defines not only that there are stages, but also that it can interrelate between different aspects of atrocity or being a risk. So I will not focus too much on this because I believe everyone has seen it. So this is the UN Framework of Analysis for Atrocity Crimes with the different risk factors that are being stated. Next slide, please. I just wanted to reiterate that UN Security Council members have stated openly. Next slide, please. Group of experts, they have provided several reports. The interesting thing is that we often see that they call it out, they call the violence and hate speech, but then at the same time, they always end up with a conclusion that targets, again, the Tutsi themselves. So we have a victim blaming system within the UN itself, which is an incredible or a huge problem that we are dealing with today. Next slide, please. So again, just an example of how Lucha is being called out specifically, and I would like to remind everyone that Lucha member Rebecca Kabua was invited to the UN Security Council with MONUSCO to discuss issues, and the latest group of experts report does not state any of the violence and incitement to violence that continues being spread by Lucha. Next slide, please. Again, just to show that it's been clearly stated in the UN reports. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to quickly focus on the causes and origins of this hate violence. Several researchers and historians, I would say particularly based in France, but also Belgium, but particularly in France, we have Jean-Pierre Chrétien, Marcel Cabanda, Alain Dumas, who have provided a number of studies on how this hate ideology has been ongoing since more or less the publication of the 1853 essay on the inequality of races by Gobineau. Next slide, please. So this is a 19th century text which has spread the racialist theories that divide according to what is considered by them today as true Africans that, excuse me, they call Bantu versus false blacks, or the Hamitic. This is based on the Hamitic hypothesis or ideology, where they claim that the Nilotics are a group of white people or invaders, which again feeds this conspiracy theory of the Tutsi invader that we see today in the analysis of the DRC crisis. Next slide, please. So not to focus too much on this because it's a long history, but it's literally simplifying, using a racist ideology to justify violence. And they have simplified it in the sense that anthropologists, or rather actually missionaries who declared themselves anthropologists, and explorers like Speck, who was there, They came and they started describing, as anthropologists, the people that they've met, that they described almost as part of the animal world, because these people had no names. When we go to the Africa Museum in Belgium, we realize that they're being described as part of the nature. It's interesting also because rivers are given names and mountains, but not people. Next slide, please. So one important aspect, and of course we can add here the Gatumba massacre and a number of others, is that this Hamitic theory and the Gobineau theory of the 19th century have led to the different genocides that we've had in the 20th century. So the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, genocide against the Tutsi, the Herero genocide. So this is the exact same racist ideology that divides people into different races, and despite the fact that we know that there's only one human race. Next slide, please. So today, just to reiterate that we have this reactualization of scientific racism, which today is promoting the conspiracy theory of the Tutsi invader, liar, killer, and rapist, which we've seen in every one of these massacres, and I would say at this point, speeches that we hear more and more during election time. The presence of FDLR today, which has been left unattended and almost justified to the point where we are not talking about it today, because the group of experts reports, although they are saying that FDLR continues to recruit it, a lot of these experts are saying that FDLR is not a threat. The issue with the presence of FDLR is the fact that the genocide ideology has been spreading in terms of not only ideologically, but materially, and in their activities of integrating other armed groups that are now being contaminated by the same type of ideology. Next slide, please. So this is just an example, again, of some of the campaigns that we see today. So I didn't want to just say this, but to show a little bit some of the examples. We have, at the time we had RTLM in Rwanda. Today we have CPG, which is another media outlet that is not only promoting the campaign of Tshisekedi, but is also spreading these conspiracy theories that are, as you can see, celebrating, for example, Habyarimana and targeting directly. Again, Rwanda has become almost a code word for Tutsi, Rwandophones, anyone with these morphological features that they interpret as being foreigners. And so we can also see how this serves as a propaganda, because you can see images here of Hema, the Hema community in Ituri being targeted by Codeco, but the death of these people is being assigned or attributed to M23. So we're playing also with blurring the situation for the international community, so that they end up saying, okay, this is just a matter of tribalism, and people on both sides are committing double genocides. And again, Genocost allows this notion. I mean, we've heard a priest talking about 3 genocides. So we are minimizing the situation and not reading it properly. Next slide, please. Again, I think most of you know that Bitakwira has been, Justin Bitakwira, who is a former minister and a deputy member, a deputy or a parliament member, who has been saying that there is this conspiracy of the Tutsi trying to invade the region, to the point where he has even compared Ruto, or not compared, but called Ruto and Museveni Tutsi, including the Fulani themselves. So I will not focus too much on Bitakwira, but I believe that this is a perfect expression of impunity to hate violence and hate speech. Next slide, please. So just a reminder that again, this is where I'd like to focus a little bit of the wrong reading of the situation and how we are perpetuating hate ideology and hate speech, but also a risk of atrocity crimes, is that we are attributing the violence that is happening in the region to, again, the community which has been targeted of that violence or by that violence for a long time. So a reminder that there's 266 armed groups in DRC with an active presence of FDLR. There has been a systemic discrimination of Congolese Tutsi communities for the past 60 years or more. And the conspiracy theories that have been ongoing since the 19th century continue on today and are persistently backing the blame on Rwanda as being the invader, the regional invader or territorial domination. So again, I do want to just contextualize that what is happening or what has happened in Gatumba in 2004 is part of this paradigm of conspiracy theory against the Tutsi invader, etc., the typical stereotypes that are being attributed. And this has led, of course, to the ostracization of the Congolese Tutsi in the Congo, but also regionally. So it's a cycle of violence that has been ongoing. Next slide, please. So the M23 rebellion, one of the reasons why I'm going to discuss this today is because this has been one of the code words, again, for everyone who will always justify violence against the Banyamulenge and the Congolese Tutsi communities by the presence of M23. Again, I will reiterate that M23 is a consequence of discrimination against the Congolese Tutsi and the type of division in society that exists in the region, particularly in the Congo today. But again, these borders were drawn in a way that was unnatural and has left communities in different countries, same communities in different countries. So the M23 today is claiming to protect communities at risk. And again, I will just switch to the next slide. Yes, after this one. Yes, I just want to, again, remind that we tend to constantly discuss the presence of M23 in the Congo, but never the 600,000 refugees that are in the neighboring countries, without mentioning all the refugees that are around the world today. So this is one of the primary also issue, is that these refugees cannot come back home, and there is this ethnic extermination or ethnic cleansing that is ongoing. Next slide, please. Yes, so actually next slide again. Just a reiteration that M23 is today being targeted. Again, this is a victim blaming situation, despite the fact that there is more deadly armed groups such as ADF and Codeco who are today committing atrocities against communities that are being targeted. Next slide. Actually, the last one after that. Yes, just to conclude, I think one of the most important things today is to recognize the root causes of the conflict and to recognize that the Gatumba massacre is part of the genocide or is a genocide that is being committed against the Congolese Tutsi communities and the Banyamulenge more particularly, that this situation is an ongoing perpetuation of hate ideology against the Tutsi in the same way that the perpetuation of hate ideology against the Jews has been ongoing and through the 1940s. It is important that we think about regional peace and how to solve this, but also atrocity prevention through the different mechanisms that we have in place. We need to push forward more mechanisms ongoing in the region, but also in the different countries themselves, including in the West. It's important that we get back to fighting against impunity and bringing back the rule of law and calling for it to stop the ethnic cleansing situation that is ongoing. And of course, making sure that we provide rights to citizenship to all, because that is a precondition to a lasting crisis resolution in the region. Thank you.
muratwihanganira ntabwo turi gusobanura kubera ko biragoye kandi turazogira ibiganiro mu Kinyamurenge nimugoroba rero ababyeyi bari hano mutwihanganire sibyo murakoze. Our next speaker is going to shed a light on the political problem that is somewhat at the root cause of the perpetual genocide against us. He recognizes that there's a political problem in Congo. Well, there's lack of political will to protect us. Our next speaker is Dr. Fredy Kanyiki. Born and raised in the Democratic Republic of Congo, he's a member of the Banyamulenge community in South Kivu. He's a graduate of the University of Colorado in Denver, in the United States. He holds 2 doctorate degrees in clinical pharmacy and epidemiology. Currently works as the director of a post-doctoral residency program through the ASHP in Alaska. He's a lecturer of pharmacokinetics, medicinal chemistry, therapeutics at different universities in the world, including in DRC, one of which being Université Ebenezer of Minembwe. On the U.S. State Department Fulbright Scholar roster, he's a fervent advocate for marginalized communities and a proud Munyamulenge. Welcome, Doctor.
May I have the lights turn on, please? The lights? The lights turn on, please. Yeah, thank you. It's really hard to say anything after the testimony that we have heard a few minutes ago, and these revive everyone's story and memories that we bury inside, that we work with every day. I would like to thank the organizing committee, the Portland, Maine Banyamulenge community for hosting this event, but also for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege that I do not take for granted. We are gathered here today to commemorate the 19th anniversary of the GATUMBA massacre, a day that will remain forever in our heart and unforgettable, where 166 Banyamulenge were violently killed in a refugee camp in Burundi. They were vulnerable people that had fled for their lives from Congo and hoping to be protected by the United Nations under the UNHCR, but they saw their life ending in GATUMBA. Now, I've been part of this event for many years, and I've given many speeches for many years. And most of the speeches we've been giving have been focusing on bandaging the emotional wounds and comforting the survivors. However, as time goes by, I realized that these killings were politically motivated. As a proof, 19 years later, after 166 people were perished, no one has been tried or arrested. No, we've seen no trial whatsoever. This shows you how politics is behind everything. It's not just, it doesn't matter the severity or the gravity of the situation, but when there is no political will, or if there is a political motivation to commit such atrocities, there is no justice. And it's not just Gatumba. On October 22nd, 1996, my father and 3 brothers were murdered the same way. That day, 46 people died on the Rusizi River at Kamanyola. They appear in the mapping report. We never saw their bodies. They were thrown in the Rusizi River. For many people, these numbers we're talking here are just numbers. They're statistics. But for many of us, these are lives. These are ambitions that were cut short. These are legacies that were ended. These are family members, dads, moms, kids, cousins that left bleeding souls behind. And we are here to remember. Forever we will remember. And as we remember, let's remember that they live within us. As you know, and I'm going to talk more politically today because that's the theme that I was given, but also because I believe politics is at the basis of this and can also be at the basis of any resolution that will end this. As you all know, Gatumba had 2 campsites. One site that had housed the Banyamulenge and another site that housed the returned Burundian refugees and the other Congolese tribes, the Babembe, the Bafuliru. Only the site that housed the Banyamulenge was attacked. The other site did not have any attack, any injury, anything, nothing at all, no death. Why? Because they knew who they were targeting. Even the 14 or 15 Babembe that died, they died because they were living on the Banyamulenge site. They paid with their lives their alliances or friendship with the Banyamulenge. It still is against the Banyamulenge, and they died because of their tolerance of the Banyamulenge. Today, we are talking about the rejection of a people, the rejection of an entire tribe. Before getting into heart of the matter, there are 3 truths that I would like to share with you today. One is that the Banyamulenge are Congolese of authentic origin. And you won't hear this very often because many people, and in general, many people describe the problem the Banyamulenge have in DRC or the Tutsi in general as a question of identity or a question of nationality. However, let's just look at the law in Congo, which has changed over the years. But whether we talk about the Congolese law, the current law that sets the starting of the Congolese of origin to 1960 at the independence, or whether it's the previous law that set the same starting Congolese nationality of origin to 1885 at the partition of Africa, the Banyamulenge were and still are Congolese of origin, unquestionably. Because if you look at the studies, the people who wrote books and reports, you will see that there are many reports that were written actually in tempore non suspecto, meaning they were written in the 19th century, some in the 18th century, and they placed the arrival of the Banyamulenge in the Congo in the 1700s. There's actually one author that were very specific and said, those Banyamulenge that came from Rwanda, because not all Banyamulenge came from Rwanda, some came from Burundi, Tanzania, Uganda, But those that came from Rwanda, they came fleeing the king, a Rwandan king called Gahindiro. And that king was in power from 1746 to 1802. So it's during that period between 1746 and 1802 that the Banyamulenge flee from what was to become Rwanda to what is now Congo. That this is a period of major movement around the world where even other Congolese tribes that live in Congo now were in movement as well, descending some from Chad, some from Cameroon, and others from Tanzania towards the territories that they now occupy. But where the shoe pinches is that people who live in a territory, before this territory knows limits or even given a name, for over 300 years are seeing their nationality disputed and are being told over and over, if you want to become Congolese, apply for Congolese citizenship individually. This is unacceptable. I've only been in the United States for 23 years, and I've been a citizen of the United States for over 15 years. And I have equal rights in the US. My great-grandparents were in the Congo in the 1700s, and yet I'm not accepted as a Congolese citizen. This is the same thing. If you look at the other Tutsi, Congolese Tutsi in the North Kivu, for example, our brothers in Ruchuru who saw the Berlin Conference draw the lines of borders right behind their houses, separating them of one hand from Rwanda and on the other hand from Uganda. And at that time, they became Congolese because Congo was becoming a country. But today, they're denied their citizenship. Why? Because of how they look. So from there, we can easily realize that it's not a matter of the date of arrival or history or migration, but it's rather how we look, our physical appearance. That's what we are victim of. We don't look like others. Not many people like to admit this, but this is the real issue. And the only explanation of the identity crisis is linked to our physical appearance. The Congolese leaders and Congolese people have failed to integrate them in their mind that a Tutsi can be an authentic Congolese. That's the pure and simple explanation. Over the years, regimes have changed. People have, presidents have come and gone and others have come, but none of them has been able to integrate in the minds of Congolese that a Tutsi can be an authentic Congolese citizen. And the few that who may have understood were unable to own it. The rest of it is just symptomatic treatment, just an epiphenomenon, trying to just bandage, treating symptoms rather than the underlying cause. Remember when there is a manhunt in the Congo for Tutsis, even people that look like Tutsis have died. You remember many Bashi, Bahavu, and even people from West Africa that died in 1998 in Congo because they just looked like Tutsi. This shows you that the issue is not whether we were in the Congo prior to Congo becoming Congo or whether the law gives us the right to a Congolese citizen. The issue is who we look like, our physical appearance. The second example for that is the Hutu refugees from Burundi and Rwanda from 1972, 1993, 1994, and so on. These people live comfortably in Congo. and no one bothers. They have integrated the communities in Masisi, in Shabunda, in Walikale, and you're not surprised to hear the phrases like, these are our brothers. And they don't have any issues. Many of them I see on Twitter, they have become more Congolese than the Congolese themselves, and they're not bothered. So the issue again is not where we came from, when we came, or the issue is our physical appearance. Now, when you talk to other Congolese, some Congolese accuse the Banyamulenge of being the cause of their misfortune, either because they will not cut the umbilical cord from Rwanda, or because of the participation in the different wars that have shaken Congo and the region. But this again is just, it couldn't be any further from the truth, because our rejection and the issues we have in the Congo did not start with AFDL or RCD or CNDP or M23-1 or M23-2. I would like to remind you here of 1986. I was a very young boy. I was in elementary school when during the election in 1986, we were allowed to vote, but no Munyamulenge was allowed to run for office. Remember, this was the time when Musafiri, Mutambo were candidates. Our grandparents and our fathers burned the votes and the equipment because we were not allowed to run for office. Would they say that at that time we were also victim of participating in different wars? There was no war. There was no war, not even news of war. And then remember the report of Mvangu Mambweni in 1995 that there was this major investigation from the Congolese parliament or Congress, and later on also with the Conférence Nationale Souveraine that qualified us of foreigners. The report came out and said the Banyamulenge and the Tutsis, Congolese Tutsi from the North Kivu are simply foreigners. And that was at the basis actually of the war in 1996. But that was before any of us, any of the Tutsi even thought of taking arms and fighting for their rights. Another thing that bothers me is that even if we consider all these wars that happened, AFDL, RCD, and so on, that are assigned to us, and we pay for their consequences every day in the media and everywhere, but we were not the leaders of these wars. AFDL belonged to Laurent Désiré Kabila, and he actually took the biggest share of the cake that came from that war. He became president. RCD, it belonged to Wamba Dia Wamba, then Emile Onusumba and others. Why don't for example, why don't the Bakongo pay for the participation of Wamba Dia Wamba in RCD? Why don't the Katange pay for the participation of Laurent Désiré Kabila in AFDL, and so on? Why don't the Bangala pay for the participation of Jean-Pierre Bemba in MLC or Ondekane in RCD? But why do we, Banyamulenge, have to pay for members of our community that participated in those wars, even though they were not on the top? So again, I'm trying to draw the line here and your attention that the issue is elsewhere. It's our physical appearance, and we are a victim of that. Now, if we jump a little bit and look at the current situation, in the recent years, the Banyamulenge have been killed in mass. We talked about the Gatumba, we talked about the killing at the Kamanyola, Rusizi River, but also since 2017, villages have been burned in hundreds. Cows have been looted in hundred thousands, and the displacement. Now we have more than 85% of Banyamulenge live outside the Congo, in refugee camp in Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and many others in Western countries. And that's why you can see a room full of Banyamulenge. We did not come here in the United States because just we wanted a better life. We came here because we didn't have any other place to live. And the place that we call home could not host us as our country anymore. Yet, I would remind many of these people, their grandparents, settled in those mountains way before, when those mountains were only covered by virgin and dense forest. And the only thing they found there were wild animals. There were no neighbor tribes at all. There are many people here whose great-grandparents either killed lions to survive or were killed by lions because those mountains were not habitable. However, now the Congolese government is just watching in silent complicity Banyamulenge being killed and kicked out of the country. Hate speech has reached its climax. It's shown in the street, on posters, on TV stations, talking about the existence of an undesirable race that should not exist. Institutions that once played a little bit of hypocrisy have now come out, officially came out in supporting those hate speeches. People like Bitakwira that were mentioned here can walk freely after they incite for violence. They call us people from Satan, people that do not deserve to live. I cannot emphasize more than the letter from the Minister of Justice to the European Union after the interpellation to stop Bitakwira from what he's doing. And on the basis of these hate speeches, arbitrary arrests have been rising, illegal detention. We have more than 65 young people, Banyamulenge, that are arrested, are in different jails in Kinshasa. Actually, if you count all the Tutsi, Congolese Tutsi, we have 200 people in Makala, Ndolo, and Demiap and Aner cells, almost all of them without trial, and with the same offense, attempt to participate in an insurrectional movement, therefore referring to M23 and Twirwaneho. And it's a very easy crime, because wherever they found you, they say you have an attempt, not even that you participated, but there is an attempt, because they read your mind. Your mind, we read your mind, and there is a sentence in your mind that is pushing you towards joining Twirwaneho or M23. Moreover, all the armed groups, which number several hundreds in the Congo, including those who destroyed the high and middle plateau, the mountains where the Banyamulenge live, have just been rewarded by becoming formal ally of the government. They are covered by the parliamentary resolution and the law, passing them off as reservists of the army. So now, today, they kill, they loot, and they rape in the name of the law. Killing a Tutsi in the Congo is actually becoming an act of bravery. the more Tutsis you kill, the brave you are. The prospects of getting out of this ultimately that has becoming secular crisis, in my opinion, is based on three things. The international community must speak out against the ongoing extermination, an almost complete ethnic cleansing, a genocide in full execution, and statelessness for the survivor. Let no one say they didn't know. Everyone must play their part. Two is we hope to have a leader who will integrate and own the historical presence of the Tutsi in Congo as an essential element of the Congolese nation, not as a branch resulting in grafting. Apply the laws and confront opinion that go against the law and the truth. The current leadership has shown its limits. I don't have any confidence in the current regime, and I don't think it can rise to the challenge. And in the meantime, before all that is done, our role and our part in history, we, the Banyamulenge and Congolese Tutsi in general, is resistance, resilience, and while refusing self-flagellation, we must fight for our rights and we must refuse to die. Thank you.
So it's mind-baffling, you know, in a world where that's ever seeking to achieve, you know, equity and diversity. It's possible. If I wanted to be a woman, I could probably go become a woman, but people still die because of who they are and the lack of political will that's there. So thank you, Dr. Freddy. I know you have programs, so we switch a little bit, so don't be alarmed. Most people are texting me. Let's hear poems from the young people who will present a couple poems.
mu bigaragara wari umunsi usanzwe nk'iyindi amasaha asanzwe gusa yabereyemo ibidasanzwe cyari igitondo gitoshe gitatswe n'umunezero twicongera ruhago abana bakina basabana tutazi ko umwanzi yapanze kudutsembaho burundu undeke nibuke kuko kwibuka si ukuzikurura inzigo ahubwo ni ukugira ngo byabaye bitazongera kubaho.
ndibuka aba bana banganaga natwe bapfuye bazira ubwoko batahisemo. ndibuka aba babyeyi bareraga neza bishwe bazira uko baremwe. ni Imana burya iyo utemye igiti ntugicane n'imizi yacyo kirongera kigashibuka. turiho kandi turangamiye ejo hazaza heza.
dore ndabyibuka nk'ibyabaye ejo koko, kwica utemye utwika utigeze kuvuga ngo ni uko uzi aho avuka, ariko ahari kuba umunyamurenge ni icyaha kibi nicuze.
bana tuvuka umurenge, bana bo mu minembwe, bana bo mu mibunda, mu mikarati, mu gitasha, ku ndondo, bibogobogo n'abandi banyamurenge. mwimpore mwimpore, nzi agahinda mufite, amarira y'abacu bicwa urubozo bindara mu matwi, urusaku rwabyo ntirutuma ntuza. ndarora minembwe n'indi misozi nkayishushanya yuzuye abo twabuze, ngaheraho ndira simore. twabuze abana, tubura abasaza, tubura ababyeyi, ariko kabone n'aho imyaka yaba ibihumbi ikivu tuzacuza. hora hora igihugu cyatubyaye, ibyabaye gatumba ntibiteze kongera gutunguka. ino ntawe uzahohoterwa duhari, ariko intembe iragwira.
What will you do after you've killed us? Will your nightmares finally disappear? Men like you mustn't have ever slept sound. No. When you spend all the money from our cows, what will you do? Surely you won't keep them now, will you? You wouldn't know how to keep anything alive, not even yourself. You let your men die in vain.
You put them at the forefront, feeding them lies, telling them we're the enemies, that their duty is to keep the country safe. And you've honed them since a young age. Of course they'll believe you. How do you feel? Deviating young souls from a brighter future, all for a purpose of power. But I get you.
Without your guns, you're nobody. Without this war, you're nobody. Without these deaths, you're nobody. Ultimately, without us, you're a nobody.
Dear Congo, some days you break my heart. I wonder if I'll ever piece myself back together. Other days you show me the kind of love I can never get from any other country. And whenever you open your arm wide, I wonder which day it's going to be. The one where I feel your warmth, or the one where you cut right through me.
It can be confusing navigating through your trauma. You have been through so many wars, you have forgotten who your children are, and I would like to take your pain away. I'm just not that strong, so I've decided to give you some space. But next time you ask me to go back where I come from, remember this, you birthed me.
I come from you, and if I'm ever to go back anywhere, it'll be for me to be where you are, because I'll forever be Congolese, even after you've killed me.
I'm sorry for the days your stomach refused to take anything in, and the days your pillow got soaked. You could have suffocated from your own despair. I'm sorry for the days you weren't able to carry your body outside because it didn't matter anymore. Now when your people were being hunted down across the ocean, all you could do was scream your lungs out. I'm sorry for the way they tried to tone down your voice to accommodate everyone else but you, and the way they asked you to not use certain words that would make other people uncomfortable. And yes, maybe you're angry, heartbroken, hopeless, tired, but how are you supposed to not be? I'm sorry for the days you stayed up thinking of many ways to help your people, the papers you missed to stand out, and the projects you didn't turn in on time. I'm sorry that at 5 years old you had to march in the cold asking for your rights to be respected.
I'm sorry that at 15 years old you had to skip your afternoon activities to design posters and banners. I'm sorry that at 20 years old you had to work, go to school, prepare for your career, and fight for your community all at once. I'm sorry that at 30 years old you had to yet again have the same conversations on how to prepare for the worst. I'm sorry that at 50 years old you had to be reminded that these rebels always come back for more blood. I am sorry for a lot of things.
But most importantly, I am sorry that you had to demand for innocent lives not to be taken. You shouldn't have to. Life is a gift that was given to all of us. I am sorry they believe taking someone else's will grant them too.
tugirana urugwiro kuko dusangiye isano imwe isumbuye amaraso ese nzirike gatumba kubera banje simuzwe nibura ngo ndenganurwe ariko urwango we ubu se nakirane kandi abisha banje mbabona bidegembya nkeneye ubutabera turamashami yashibutse kwishavu ariko ntibizatubuza gushasharirana.
Moment, we will hear another quick testimony from survivor, Posa David, who will furthermore talk about what happened in a few minutes.
Good morning. I must apologize because at this time my head is already foggy. So if I have any hiccup, please excuse me. I do have less than 10 minutes to go through it. But I'll do my best. Today I stand before you to share a deep personal and harrowing experience that forever changed my life. On August 13th, 2004, I found myself caught in the midst of horrific GATUMBA massacre. These brutal events took the life of 166 people and they left 100 more wounded. I survived, but the scar upon my soul served as constant reminder of the horror that unfolded that fateful evening. My name is David Mhoza. I am the GATUMBA survivor. Again, talking about this night is something I tend to avoid because it brings so much pain, the wound deep in my heart that I don't think will ever heal. Please bear with me as I share my experience of that terrible night. I came from a family of 7 children, 4 boys, 3 girls. My family lived in Uvira, Congo. Like everyone else, we were always in a hideout from the rebels as they were constantly attacking us, the ABANYAMULENGE community. I cannot pinpoint the time where it all started because that was the norm. During the rebel attack, we would flee to GATUMBA and come back when it was safe. And that was the life that I knew. As a 12-year-old, I was used to that kind of life, but I started asking myself, why are my people persecuted? I later came to realize that it was because of who we are. Fast forward, the last time rebels attacked, it was not any different. We flee to GATUMBA expecting that things will settle down and then we will be able to return back to Uvira. The night we were attacked, it started off as normal. I remember it was around 10 p.m. when we had just finished eating dinner and we were getting ready to go to bed. Suddenly, we had gunshots that were firing nonstop. However, prior to that, we lived normal life in camp. One of the things that I enjoyed was playing soccer or football, as we call back home. We had two teams, the adult team and the junior team. I played in the junior team. It was one of my hobbies, and every day I got to play football. However, one afternoon, as we were playing football, I had a very terrible accident. It so happened that I wanted to kick the ball with my head, and then we jumped together with one of the players, and our head collided, and I came down, and the player hit me on the back of my lower back, and I ended up falling on my back, and I was paralyzed. For days, I could not do anything, any activity of daily living on my own. My parents and siblings were helping me with everything. As the events unfold, you can imagine the physical that I had to endure. The intensity of the bombs that were blasting through the camp healed my back completely. Up to today, from the day I was paralyzed up to today, I have never been in a hospital treated. Those bombs actually healed me completely. And as the killing continued, my dad came to check on my little brother and I to see if we were still alive, and we confirmed we were. He offered to help me move, but I told him that my back was healed, and I informed him that I'm capable of run if we need to run. At this time, my dad asked my mom if she could come with us, but she refused and said she will hide under the mattress. My mom asked us to leave so as to avoid being killed all once. As soon as we got out of the tent, the whole camp was set ablaze, and all I could see was fire burning and hearing people howling and crying for help. Again, enemy was still actively shooting. My father made a quick decision to increase the chance of survival for all of us. He took me in his right hand and my little brother in his left hand. He then asked if we could run separately. I agreed. The idea was if one of us was killed, the other would have a chance to survive. Scared as I was, I ran toward the little town nearby. As I fled, shots were being fired around me, and people were falling left to right in front of me. My aim was to reach the town by running through the bush area. It was a nightmare. When I reached the bush area, I stayed there until I could not hear a gunshot anymore. I stayed until up to 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning. After a while, I heard people talking and a car passing in the distance. I wrestled through the weather, through my thought and whether I could be the enemy or potential danger. However, my curiosity and hope pushed me to cautiously approach the source of the sound. Carefully, I moved slow toward the area where the people were gathered, making sure to remain hidden. From my point of view, I observed them in order to determine whether they were my people or my enemy. After observing them, I was able to recognize them as non-threatening individuals. Feeling more secure, I decided to reveal myself and join them. Remember, throughout this time, I was dressed only in short, leaving me exposed to thorn and cut through and poked hole in my skin, as well as mosquitoes that were biting me relentlessly, but I had to endure so to save my life. Upon reaching the group, I informed them about separating my father and my little brother, as well as leaving my mom behind in a tent. I expressed uncertainty about well-being. not knowing if they were alive or dead. I felt very hopeless and miserable. It was in dark morning, around 4 a.m. or 5, where I embarked a journey toward the GATUMBA camp. With each step, our heart was heavily uncertain as we encountered family who had also survived the unimaginable massacre. We shared the story hoping to find any trace of our loved one. Around about 6 a.m., that's when I met my dad and my younger brother. But we didn't know where about our older sister, no mom. But the distance we could see, our tent was completely destroyed to the ground. So we knew our mom has perished. As we walked toward in the morning to the camp, we were running through a lot of bodies on the ground. And then I ran through my brother. I saw Desiree here and engineer where they were sitting, crying, and their parent was deceased. And there were also other brothers, Kararashoni, that came by, excuse me. Came by and say, Uncle, I've lost all my parents. It's just me and my younger brother that's left. Everybody else is deceased. The GATUMBA massacre forever altered the course of my life. It's awakened within me the thirst of determination to fight for justice, to speak out against injustice, and advocate for the world free from violence. I urge each and every one of you to join me in this fight so that together we can create a brighter and more compassionate future for our generation to come. Thank you.
Thank you, David. As a reminder, this year's theme is Denied Justice is a Human Rights Denial. Our next speaker is Dr. Robert Bernheim. He's the keynote speaker for our event today, and we're glad to have him. He is an associate professor of history at the University of Maine at Augusta. He received his PhD in modern German history from McGill University in Montreal and taught for several years in association with the Miller Center for Holocaust Studies at the University of Vermont. He is the executive director of the Holocaust and Human Rights Center of Maine. He currently oversees the minor program in Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Studies at the University of Maine. Welcome, Robert.
As a hot and humid day dawned in August, the townspeople learned that there was going to be a mass execution at the old cemetery just outside of town. Upon hearing the news, many in the community packed picnic lunches to watch the executions and celebrate the deaths of their neighbors. They traveled to the cemetery on foot and by horse and wagon. The place, a small town in southeast Poland, not far from today's border with Ukraine. The time, August 1942, smack in the middle of what has become known as the Nazi Holocaust. The killers, a combination of German security forces and Gestapo, ably assisted by their local Polish helpers, the so-called Blue Police, drawn from the male population of the town, the surrounding area, as well as some ethnic Germans Volksdeutsche, living among them. But this picnic and murder event did not just happen one time, but twice on consecutive days. On both occasions, it was to celebrate the execution of over 100 of their remaining Jewish neighbors. A festive mood prevailed that day with a patchwork spread of blankets and overflowing baskets of food and drink, and this abundance despite wartime rationing and shortages. All the while, little kids played hide and seek among the headstones of the 300-year-old Jewish cemetery on a hill overlooking a rolling picture postcard agricultural landscape. Genocide spilling onto a beautiful pastoral space, an indelible scene for all who witnessed it, and one that still baffles the imagination of those of us who did not experience it. The German police and their Polish collaborators carried out the executions of men and teenage boys on the first day who had been forced at gunpoint to dig their own graves, and women and young children the next day. The shooters and their victims stood within mere yards of one another, and the picnickers sat back on their blankets and toasted their imagined newfound fortunes while laughing along merrily to the shots of guns. According to surviving eyewitnesses, the picnicking bystanders and the killers acted with total impunity. When the killing was done on the second day, the picnickers delayed their departure to enjoy the last bites of as the shooting pits were filled with fresh earth. By nightfall, these same neighbors who picnicked at the execution of Jews ransacked the homes and businesses of the murdered and took up permanent residence in these same homes and businesses. The Nazi Holocaust struck this small shtetl of Kęczuga in southeast Poland with traumatic and indelible force. Members of my own family were among the murdered on those picnic days, among those asphyxiated in the gas chambers of the Nazi extermination camp of Belzec, and among those blown up by grenades in a local attack during the closing days of World War II. I never learned such truths until I became an adult. The custodians of memory in my family shrouded these events in desperate secrecy. They deflected and ignored my request for information or lied outright with the express purpose of not reigniting the trauma visited upon our family in those days. As many of you know, there are no research aids for finding or recovering such archives of loss. There is a permanent hole in the heart of my family and hundreds of others as a result of this massacre and subsequent acts of genocide. In addition, not one of those perpetrators, does it surprise us, those who pulled the triggers or those who rounded up the victims, German or Polish, ever stood trial for the role that they played in the murder of hundreds of innocent people. It is as if the murderers got away with the most horrific of crimes, hundreds dead and no one has been held accountable. We beseechingly ask, is this justice? What happened to the human rights of those murdered and intended as victims? On top of that, no reparations have ever been paid to the surviving victims and their families for the loss of property and livelihoods, not to mention the loss of life. Neighbors and Nazis stole and pillaged the contents and inventories of Jewish family homes and their businesses, including the dental practice of my grandmother's cousin and generations of family recipes from a bakery, as well as a restaurant run by my relatives. Not a trace left, no marked graves, nothing tangible, a total void. In fact, in contrast to the Jewish survivor community, more than 80 years afterwards, the local Polish population has suppressed much of this history while barely acknowledging that it took place. It's as if the massacre never happened. Students at the local school don't even know that Jews once inhabited this town for hundreds of years prior to the war and lived vibrant and engaging lives the whole time. Who among them knows that what is today a local branch of the Polish bank was once my family's bakery, turning out 1,000 rolls a day and dozens of bagels, rye and whole grain breads, hundreds of pastries 6 days a week. The synagogues, the bathhouse, the places of prayer and study have all become someone else's home or retail stores, like a rabbi's house that is now a Tractor Supply store. Little prayer boxes, the mezuzahs attached to the right-hand side of the doorframe as you approach the house, have all been removed. Their outline is the only visible reminder or a trace of Jewish life that is no more. In addition, the local Catholic Church has not uttered a word of protest or challenged its own history in those dark days of the German occupation. Furthermore, the Polish national government has notably made every effort to whitewash the history of the Nazi Holocaust and pass legislation that made it illegal to challenge the narrative that Poles did not collaborate with the Germans. True history is in danger of being replaced and erased by a false and inaccurate narrative in order to fit an increasingly populist political landscape. Forgetting, as many of you have testified today, is indeed a second death. A quote long attributed to Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. And as Jean noted in his introduction this morning, remembrance is an act of honor. Wiesel's words resonate with our topic today. 19 years ago tomorrow evening, a similar mass execution, a massacre to the one in Poland, took place at the UN refugee camp at KATUMBA in eastern Burundi. As poignantly recounted by Genja and other survivors this morning, over 160 human beings, mostly women and children, were systematically murdered by the forces of Hutu supremacist militia groups and the National Liberation Front and their allies as part of a much larger and longer genocidal plan that targeted the Banyamulenge people and continues to do so this day. As Adele noted today, a lack of justice has allowed more violence and more killings to continue. In this time I'm privileged to share with you today, I will use the story I opened with of the massacre of the Jews in Nazi-occupied Poland as a framework to address overarching questions and issues of human rights, their history and their context, as well as their limits in the enforcement in the unending quest for justice with regard to the massacre at KATUMBA in 2004. Denied justice is indeed human rights denial. What we do with this knowledge in navigating the topography of memory is, however, most important moving forward. Honoring and maintaining the integrity and memory of the murdered, the marginalized, and the maligned among the Banyamulenge, while persistently calling for accountability and justice, is at the heart of today's message. To begin, however, I would like to express my thanks and appreciation to Claude and the entire leadership team of the Banyamulenge community in the greater Portland area for the invitation to speak at this important annual conference commemorating the 19th anniversary of the massacre at the GATUMBA refugee camp. I am truly humbled and honored to be before you today to deliver this keynote address. But let's continue with a bit of context and history. We use the terms human rights and justice with hardly a thought to where they come from. The concept of modern human rights is rooted in the destructive aftermath of two world wars in the first half of the 20th century, but the origins of human rights, it can be argued, extend back to the origins of the first human beings, the first peoples, and the formations of societies. Anthropologists will tell us that virtually all religious beliefs have creation stories that draw attention to human rights issues. In these stories, humans may begin to interact with a supreme being, but these narratives, both oral and written, also describe the interaction with human beings and other human beings. And in all of them, these anthropologists remind us there is a notion of duo, D-U-O, duo. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is a prescription for how to interact with one another. Treat others as you want to be treated. And in all of these narratives in the religious texts and oral traditions, there are benefits and rewards for good behavior and punishments and penalties for what is called bad behavior. Again, many of you know this as the laws of sowing and reaping. You reap what you sow. These narratives therefore introduce and emphasize the concept of justice, that our actions as human beings have consequences, both for positive and negative results. When Cain murdered his brother Abel, for instance, as chronicled in the first book of the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis chapter 4, he is held accountable. Cain's blood is avenged. Abel does not get away with murder. In the Western world, as many of our legal scholars remind us, the evolution of human rights is rooted in political and governmental philosophy expressed through important documents. The Magna Carta in England in 1215, the English Bill of Rights of 1689, the U.S. Colonial Declaration of Independence in 1776, the French Declaration of of the Rights of Man and Citizens in 1789, and the U.S. Constitution with its embedded Bill of Rights in 1791 are just some of the documents that provide a foundation for what our rights as humans are and how we can and should protect them. Unfortunately, however, many of these documents also exclude the other in the societies they sprang from. These could be women, people of color, native peoples, immigrants, members of certain religious or ethnic groups, etc. Still, we as humans often hold these documents up as evidence of the ideal to strive for in the pursuit of human rights. As the Declaration of Independence so succinctly states, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," for example. As noted, the modern version of human rights is rooted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights with its 30 articles. Now in its 75th anniversary year, this declaration was, as the UN's High Commissioner's Office has noted, quote, "created as a roadmap for peaceful societies, born out of chaos, despair, and bloodshed of 2 world wars, and the desire that such atrocities should never happen again," end of quote. Consequently, the Universal Declaration promises to promote human rights for all people. To guarantee these rights, the United Nations established a UN Commission on Human Rights. To date, more than 185 nations have incorporated many of these key principles of universal human rights into their own national constitutions. And while declarations are not legally binding documents, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is recognized as customary international law and is a common standard of achievement for all people and nations, according to the UN Commission. Regardless of the ideals, however, we know all too well, this gathering reinforces that such platitudes are often described as the world's most unfulfilled promise. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and diplomat Samantha Power has noted that "never again," stated I think behind me, is a phrase that has ceased to have value because genocide and human rights violations keep happening over and over. In her words, it's more like "never again, again." In light of the scope and sequence of the development of human rights, GATUMBA stands as a powerful example of the failure of these same human rights to protect the lives of the innocent. Using GATUMBA as our case study, let's take a look at what I refer to as the stumbling stones to human rights. What gets in the way of the concept and consistent implementation of human rights? In Nazi Germany, if a person tripped over a stone, a popular anti-Semitic saying during the day was by way of explanation that a Jew must be buried there. In 1992, a German artist, Gunther Demnig, created a memorial project called Stolpersteine, or stumbling stones or stumbling blocks, the Stumbling Stone Project, to counter this anti-Semitic saying. An approximately 4-inch concrete cube with a brass plate covering was placed in front of the homes or businesses where Jews had once lived during the Third Reich and included their names, birth date, and place and date of deportation during the Nazi Holocaust. Walking the streets of Germany and now all of Europe, we can literally stumble upon history when human rights were not honored. But what are the Stolpersteine, the stumbling stones of human rights regarding the GATUMBA massacre? The first of many Stolpersteine, or stumbling stones to human rights in this instance, is the politicalization of memory. And we heard Dr. Freddy speak about this earlier. We are well aware that the governments of Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo did not stop the massacre. In fact, these governments failed really to investigate and prosecute the perpetrators and ensure that victims receive any kind of compensation. Within months, as noted here, a report loaded with eyewitness accounts was filed with the UN Security Council calling for the immediate initiation of national and international judicial proceedings. Nothing came of such a cry for justice in the fall of 2004, and unfortunately nothing has come of it since. These very same perpetrators who organized the GATUMBA massacre and carried it out are now seemingly untouchables as members of coalition ruling parties as a result of terms of a ceasefire agreement at the end of the civil war in Burundi. These are the very same leaders who faced charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity that were subsequently derailed due to increasing pressure in a world where where political power and influence were and are for sale. These perpetrators, who are now leaders, act without regard for the heinous crimes they committed. Here, politics superseded truth, the politicalization of memory. Assassins of memory and sequined memory make up the substance of the second Stolpersteine, or stumbling stone to human rights. Scholars and diplomats alike may cite the UN Declaration on Human Rights as an example of a written document that's actually a difference maker and lifesaver. But as noted today by scholars and eyewitnesses, neither the UN Declaration on Human Rights nor the UN and its security forces prevented the massacre at Gatumba, nor have they stopped the relentless train of blame heaped on the victims, victim blaming and shaming as alleged causes of their own deaths. This is what a Holocaust scholar has termed assassins of memory. Such lies continue unabashed and seemingly unchecked nearly 2 decades after the mass killing. So what do these assassins of memories attempt to substitute the truth of August 13, 2004 with? What I refer to as sequined memory. This is an embellished and shiny form of memory that masks the truth of what really transpired in that refugee camp 19 years ago, all the while weaving a false replacement narrative. As we have heard, the ABANYAMULENGE are subject to hate speech and are often the targets of attacks and continued harassment by these assassins of memory. Recent reports in Maine and Boston newspapers have investigated hate groups active in our corner of the world who are determined to create a white ethno-state among other racist goals here in Maine and across New England. Populist politics at home and abroad smack of vicious nativism. This results in conscious efforts on the part of hate groups and white nationalists, also assassins of memory, to disrupt and ultimately destroy lives. That's what sequined memory does in a clever bait and switch.